Very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chemtech, for giving me this opportunity. I hope I'm audible. Am I? Okay. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here in the session again. Of course, we are all getting used to the virtual world, but then ultimately we will need to lead our business in the real world. But we are in a very interesting space as far as the oil and gas industry is concerned, especially in India. Overall, globally, it's going through a tremendous transition. And when people invented the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, and so on, we probably thought that it was a nice term to see. But then actually we are experiencing all that in our industry over the last couple of years with extreme volatility, with extreme uncertainty, and decision making becoming very, very difficult in this scenario. But having said that, I think what the world is seeing and what India is seeing is a slightly different trajectory, if I may say so. Since we are focused on the market situation, let me just start by saying that India Energy Outlook 2021, which is a special report of the IEA's World Energy Outlook, examines the opportunities and the challenges faced by our country, which is the third largest energy consumer in the world. Now this report has reaffirmed that India is set to experience the largest increase in energy demand of any country worldwide for the next 20 years, as its economy continues to develop and bring greater prosperity to its citizens. With the government's focus on economic development and Atmanirbhar Bharat, there is a huge opportunity for all of us in the industry. No doubt, COVID has been a dampener and could potentially have an impact on long-term demand. I'm sure my speaker, Ishita, is going to deal with that subject. But when I say it's a dampener in relation to the earlier projections that we were making in the industry. Maybe the COVID has also accelerated the pace of energy transition globally. The other major challenge with the industry is facing has been the lower cracks, which is the gasoline, the diesel, and the ATF. The cracks which have been hovering very, very low and making refining as a very difficult business financially to deal with. So this has been a huge dampener for refineries across the world, and with stagnating and in some cases even lowering of demand in the Eurozone as well as in Asia, Oceania. There have been reports of closure of some low capacity and inefficient refineries. So all these things actually are confusing the world in the sense that, where are we going directionally? And whether this is a business which is going to last. These are questions which are being faced by the leadership across the industry. But while many of these induced uncertainties have caused stress in the industry in most parts of the world, I believe that the Indian growth story would carve out its own path. I was also listening to the earlier talk, and most of our people in the country are very, very upbeat about the opportunities which are available in our country, and I share the same optimism, and I will explain why I do so. We still believe that the Indian growth story would carve out its own path. We have very low per capita consumption of energy and petrochemicals compared to even world average. I'm not talking about the developed nations and their capacities and so on. Similarly, our vehicle ownership is also far, far lower. We are talking of vehicle ownership of around 45 to 50 range per 1,000 population, whereas countries like US are talking of 850 vehicles per 1,000. So even if we have to step up this 45 to say 60 per 1,000, it would mean a humongous growth opportunity for our country. So I think the trajectory for India is bound to be very, very different in terms of the growth opportunities. India will also have to carve out its unique path of multiple energy choices. I mean, there is no doubt that energy demand is going to be substantially more. Uh, One of the reasons is that we have no choice but to grow as an economy. Let me say that, India, I mean, while the Prime Minister has also been talking about a 5 trillion economy and a 10 trillion economy by 2025, 2040, and so on, we as citizens of the country will need to really share that optimism that India has to grow. Because otherwise, our actions as part of the industry would be very, very different. I mean, it depends on how you look at the view of the country in terms of its growth opportunities. The other major issue is that we say that we have a demographic dividend in the country. I mean, demographic dividend because 35% of our population is less than 65 years of age. So when we have a huge population which is very youthful and they're looking for growth opportunities and employment opportunities in the country, we don't have a choice but to grow economically. So if you have to grow economically and we need to reach those aspirational levels of a 5 trillion and a 10 trillion economy, which is, I mean, a 10 trillion is almost four to five times of the current size of the economy. So if economy has to grow so much, energy will be a very, very key driver to this growth story. So I share tremendous optimism in terms of this, that the energy industry is bound to grow substantially in future in the country. But what does energy as a basket talk about, and what do individual fuels constitute in this? I think this is where India will have to carve out its own unique path of multiple energy choices. Conventional energy of oil, gas, coal, renewables, alternatives, all of them will need to grow in absolute terms. So today, many people say, what will happen if electric vehicles come to conventional fuels and so on? See, I believe that electric vehicles will also have a space in our market. We will have conventional energy also will have a space in our market. Alternatives like, I mean, the renewables certainly will have its own market space. The alternatives like ethanol or methanol or the biofuels, any of those will have its own space in the market. All of them will have to constitute the overall energy basket in terms of a proportion. As a percentage, you can say that there will be some variances. I mean, if coal is going to constitute something like 42-43% currently, it may drop down by a couple of percentage points. If oil and gas has got a particular percentage, it may undergo a shift. For example, government as a policy is talking about taking the share of natural gas from the current 6.2% to 15%. So a lot of policies are being worked out around this. Infrastructure is getting developed around this to actually take up this share in the energy basket to about 15%. While whether it actually reaches 15% or not, one thing is for sure, that the natural gas consumption in absolute terms in the country is going to go up. Similarly, even conventional fuels will actually in absolute terms have to grow. And so is the case with even products like ethanol or with solar energy or with wind energy. All forms of energy will have to grow in the overall energy basket. But the trajectory here for India will have to be very different compared to the global trajectory. Now, in the COVID scenario, what has really got subsumed as far as the oil and gas sector is concerned, and I have spent more than 40 years in this industry, so I can talk with that conviction. What really has got subsumed is the enormous effort of the refining industry in qualitatively upgrading our fuels. I mean, at the turn of this millennium, we were not even marketing Euro 1 fuels. I mean, if you talk of one specific parameter which is used to measure this, I mean, in terms of a specification, we used to market diesel with 1% sulfur content at the turn of the millennium. 1% sulfur content is 10,000 parts per million. Today, we are talking of Euro 6 fuels, which is 10 parts per million. We have come down from 10,000 parts per million to 10 parts per million in a matter of the last 20 years. And only in 2014, we started even conversion to Euro 4, and it took us almost up to 17 to really step up in all the refineries. And in a matter of 3 years, we have been able to literally convert the entire country, across the country, to Euro 6 by 2020 April. We introduced this. Because of COVID, I believe that the enormous effort that has gone into the industry to convert to Euro 6 has really got hidden in this whole story of COVID. But you must believe that industry has done a humongous amount of work in this conversion. I mean, never before in world over, this sort of a technological upgradation in fuel quality has happened in a matter of 3 years. And even when we converted to Euro 4 levels, it was done in phases across the country. I mean, not to talk of the earlier Euro 3 and so on, which were all done in phases. Whereas in Euro 6, we had converted across the country in one shot in a matter of 3 years since we actually shifted to Euro 4. So this is something which is a brilliant accomplishment of the entire refining sector. And the fact is that Euro 6 fuels with Euro 6 vehicles have much lower emissions is also hardly getting highlighted. I mean, in the whole thing about emissions and I mean, when you're talking of pollution, climate change and so on, the fact that Euro 6 fuels used in Euro 6 vehicles will actually emit far, far less compared to any of the other conventional fuels is actually not getting highlighted sufficiently. I mean, this I'm talking as a part of the refining industry, but there is a huge potential to lower tailpipe emissions in old vehicles. I mean, as old vehicles get replaced over a period of time to Euro 6 vehicles. In any case, from 2020 April onwards, all the new vehicles which are coming into the system are all meeting Euro 6 norms. So over a period of time, combined with the scrapping policy of the government, if all the vehicles, old vehicles are bound to be replaced with Euro 6 vehicles, then the real benefit of the lowering of emissions will be seen by the industry. The other major thing which is happening is the diets of the refineries. It is undergoing a tremendous shift. When I talk of diets of the industry, I mean refining industry, it means the crudes which are getting processed in the industry. Now, Indian refineries by far have the greatest amount of flexibility. I mean, especially with large capacity refineries coming up both in the private sector as well as in the public sector. I mean, we have always been priding ourselves that we can use the worst of the crudes, whether the heavy crudes from Latin America or Canada and so on, to the lighter crudes. We are able to process a variety of crudes across our majority of our new refineries. And even some of the older refineries have all been upgraded to process a wide variety. So as a country, this gives us a tremendous opportunity of the ability to source from various parts of the world depending on the economics. Now, this is also undergoing a shift in worldwide because the availability of heavy crudes have actually been coming down. I mean, thanks in part to the global the political developments and so on, and countries like Venezuela having their own problems. I mean, the Middle East, some of the countries are having their own problems and so on. So the availability of the heavy crudes have also been coming down. And parallelly, the US shale and also some of the lighter crudes which are available from Middle East and the integration of the petrochemical is pushing many of the refiners towards a lighter crude diet. So on the one hand, the discount which was available with the heavier crude is actually narrowing down because the availability of heavier crude is going down. At the same time, the availability of the lighter crudes are also becoming more. With the result, many of the refiners are also looking at how do they alter their configurations. The higher availability of lighter crudes and focus on petrochemical integration is playing a role in the choice of crudes for processing. So in this sort of a scenario, some of the challenges and questions facing refiners are, number one, in India, do we plan for more greenfield or brownfield projects? Refinery petrochemical integration, to what extent do we integrate? How much can we do in the low capacity and old refineries in the country? How do we further improve the energy efficiency in the refineries? I mean, while energy efficiency improvement is also required in the automobile usage, how do we improve energy efficiency in the refineries? How do we further reduce the emissions in the refineries. I mean, these are going to be very, very critical issues which are facing the refiners. How do we focus on the health, safety, and environment in the refineries? I mean, health as an issue has got a tremendous, focus because of the pandemic situation that we are facing. I mean, safety has always been important, environment has always been important, but all these, the health, safety, and environment as a whole is going to gain increasing importance because of the pandemic situation, because of issues facing climate change, and all, related aspects. The other major issue is how do we move towards greater technology adoption, such as IoT, AI, and digital. I mean, this is something which is a challenge to all the refiners. How do we address concerns of cyber security? I mean, you talk of any consultant today, they say digital is really the route going forward in terms of improving your efficiencies, improving your productivity, and so on and so forth, reliability and all that. But at the same time, we also have to see what are the issues concerning cybersecurity and so on. Most importantly, how do we stabilize the financial performance amidst the volatility with adequate returns to incentivize further investments in the growing industry? I mean, this is the biggest challenge. I mean, when things are not looking too good in the financial front, how do companies really make further investments in the same industry while at the same time recognizing that India is a growing market, we need additional capacities, whether it is refining capacity or petrochemical capacity. In the midstream and downstream marketing, there are equally big challenges. How do we plan business models for energy transition? How do we plan gas infrastructure to increase the usage from 6.2 to 15%? What would be the contribution of bioenergy and biofuels in the country? How do we speed up execution of projects in the current context? So all these things, I mean, I'm sure this list is not very exhaustive, but the great thing about this is that we have so many challenges, and when we have so many challenges, it also means that we have so much of opportunities in the country. We are not a stagnant industry. We are still a very robust and growing industry. There is a huge demand and a potential in our market, and that market needs to be serviced by the industry. So that is the great thing. In India, we always say that we are not really demand constrained. We are actually supply constrained. Whether you talk of refining or whether you talk of petrochemicals, today the constraints are in terms of our supplies. I mean, do we have competitive units, capacities which can really compete in global standards? Why do we have so much of imports of many products happening, despite the fact that there are capacities available in the country? It is because most of the units are old, they are probably inefficient, they are low capacity, they are not able to compete. So how do we really make an industry which can compete with that of global standards? That is the major issue which is facing the industry. So from a refining perspective, I can say that India has been a refining hub, at least over the last 20 years. We have been able to enhance our supply situation ahead of the demand. But today we have come to a stage when the supply and demand balance is almost on balance. We need additional capacities. Fortunately, some newer capacities have been announced or they are under implementation. We have at least a couple of greenfield projects, one in Rajasthan and another in Tamil Nadu, which has been announced recently. There are a lot of brownfield capacities which are also being implemented. Parallelly, there is a lot of integration which is happening, but we need to develop the ecosystem in terms of the petrochemicals. We truly do not have a petrochemical ecosystem which is conducive, which is of world class. I mean, we can't talk in terms of something which can match Jurong or Rotterdam or some places like that. So we have a tremendous opportunity. Most of the other countries are looking for the market. We are fortunate to have a market. No doubt the market is price sensitive, but at the same time, we also need to plan for investments, for capacity enhancements, for competitive sizing of our units, which can sustain over time. So with that, I stop my introduction. I would like to invite Ishita Singh who's the main speaker in this session. Ishita, of course, is from IHS, the world-renowned service provider, consultancy agency for the oil industry. I would say that today when IHS says something, we all tend to take it very, very seriously. But even IHS would probably confess that what they said 2 years back and what they're going to say now can be vastly different, because globally many things are happening which are much beyond the control. But having said that, I think the credentials of IHS is extremely, extremely strong, and they are really, an agency which have a tremendous amount of experience and data supporting their analysis. And we look forward to Ishita. Ishita, of course, has been with IHS for the last more than 5 years, and she is basically she holds a Masters in Business Administration from UPES, Dehradun, India. And she's an expert in oil markets, midstream, downstream, and she's also part of the chemical team. I think she's going to, she's going to talk about, she's going to take on from the pandemic. I'm sure she will be talking a little bit about where she sees the vaccine playing a role, and of course, linking it up to how she sees the markets developing with a specific focus on India, maybe starting with a global focus and specific focus on India. So let's listen to Ishita, and after that we can have our open session with some questions. So over to you, Ishita. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok. I'll just share my presentation and then we can start. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Ishita Singh from IHS Market, and in my capacity as senior analyst, I look after the Asian and Indian refined products market. In our session today, we will be talking about vaccine deployment and containment policies which are being implemented across different regions and countries across the globe, and how they are affecting the refined products demand recovery. We'll also have a look at global refined products demand market. And lastly, we'll also have a brief look into the Indian refined products demand market and how the market was in 2020 and how it is recovering going into 2021. Uh, I suppose by the end of the session, we will be able to understand how rate of vaccine deployment varies from country to country, and which regions or countries are recovering faster compared to each other, and what are the reasons for the same. So, moving on to the major agendas of our presentation. Uh, we will be answering some questions around how there are regional disparities in the pace of vaccine deployment across different regions. And we expect that as the pace of vaccine picks up pace, refined products demand will return to pre-virus levels in 2021. However, we can see that the uptake rate of vaccines is pretty asymmetrical across different regions, and it is expected to weigh on demand. However, the positive tone that is attached to vaccine deployment is very strong, and some of the countries in Asia and Latin American region have already started to recover to pre-virus levels despite of the ongoing pandemic. And we hope that we will see a better demand for the overall global refined products market by the summer of 2021. And with also with the deployment of some fiscal stimulus policies by governments of US, Europe, and India, we expect that the overall global refined products demand will come back to pre-virus levels by in the next 2 to 3 years. At the same time, if we talk about crude runs and refinery utilization rates, they have been weak, and the pandemic led to a huge demand destructions, which forced the refineries to cut runs, and they continue to be low. Currently, we estimate that in the first quarter of 2021, the global refinery utilization rate will hover around 76%, and it will not recover to the 5-year average until the end of 2022. Uh, in the next few slides, we will be talking about the global economic outlook, the vaccine outlook, and how containment measures across the world are progressing and how they are impacting the refined products demand. So, if you look at the presentation at the chart, you can see that we have mapped out some of the major countries and their GDP outlooks. The global GDP dropped by 3.7% in 2020, which was the steepest decline since 1946. Uh, European region, which is still struggling to cope up with the pandemic, has recently implemented some severe restrictive measures because of the resurgence of virus and also the resurgence of a new variant of virus, which is weighing on the global economic recovery. Also, if we talk about some of the growth regions, Asia Pacific, specifically China and India, are leading the economic recovery, and they will be the drivers for global economic recovery in the in the coming years, with India rising by 9.8% and China rising by approximately 7.6%. Now, moving on to the containment measures which are being implemented across the globe, we can see that in this chart, by global containment index, we mean the restrictiveness being implemented by governments or countries across the globe. So, the green line, which represents the global containment index, you can see that in the first quarter of 2021, that is January and February, March, you can see the containment index is moving upwards, which means that there are higher restrictions being implemented. However, if you look at the gray line, which represents the global oil demand, it is not dropping as such. The reason for this is that even though Europe is a very big market and there are containment measures being implemented there, there are different countries within the EU region, and the containment measures vary from country to country. Also, the major demand markets, which are India and China, they continue to grow, and they are large demand markets, and demand in these countries continues to grow, which is why despite despite the rise in global containment index, the demand is not dropping as such. In fact, it is growing upwards. uh, if you look at the chart, which shows vaccine uptake forecasts, there are regional disparities in terms of the vaccine uptake. There are various reasons for which there are various reasons for the asymmetrical uptake of vaccines across different regions. One of them is willingness of people to get vaccinated, which is the case in India. The demographics, the weather conditions, and some of the supply chain issues that some countries face in vaccine deployment. Also, with the new type of COVID variant coming up, it is adding on to the dilemma whether the available vaccines will be able to prove effective. Uh, so now, moving on to the main reason why we are moving towards vaccination programs and why governments are encouraging people to go ahead and get vaccinated, is to vaccinate the high risk groups, which we have highlighted here. The high risk group means the 60 plus year old age group. As we vaccinate the high risk groups, we will be able to lower down the hospitalization rates and remove the pressure from the medical staff, and eventually leading to demand recovery. As of now, 170 million doses of vaccines have been rolled out across the globe, of which more than 50 million in US and more than 40 million in China. So if you look at the red and green lines, which represents India and Russia, we expect that the vaccine uptake rate will remain low compared to other countries, and they will be able to vaccinate their high risk groups only by late 2022 or early 2023. Whereas if you look at countries like US and UK, they will be able to vaccinate their high risk groups by early March and early February. So we expect that by vaccinating, US government will be able to relax their stay-at-home orders, and by March, since President Joe Biden is also pushing for vaccination, and hospitalization rates have already started to come down. So we expect, as the vaccination uptake rate picks up pace across major geographies, the demand will start to recover by mid 2021. Um, Now talking about the demand outlook for major refined products market, in the next few slides we will be looking at some of the countries who have which have started to recover even before the vaccines could properly be distributed among the larger audiences. And we will be largely looking at three countries: mainland China, India, and Brazil, who are at the forefront of gasoline and diesel demand recovery. So we talked about vaccine uptake, but the cascade from vaccine uptake to demand recovery is majorly a US and European story. However, when we come to the emerging markets like mainland China, India, and Brazil, they are already showing pre-virus level demand levels. So by the end of 2020, global refined products demand hovered around 89% of 2019 levels. However, in countries like China, India, and Brazil, demand was already over 100% by the end of 2020. The foremost reason for this, when we talk about China, is that China implemented draconian lockdown measures very early in the pandemic, which led to upfront demand destruction, however, supported strong recovery in demand by the second half of 2020 and still continue to do so. Now, when we talk about countries like India and Brazil, the structure of their economy is such that not many people can work from home. So, despite the implementation of lockdown and restrictive measures, people continue to move out, continue to go to fields, and continue to move, which is very fundamental to these to their economy. Which is why even because as soon as the lockdown was removed, the demand recovered very quickly, especially in terms of gasoline and diesel as mobility increased substantially. So now moving on to the regional demand scenario and how the refinery utilization rates have been. Um, the overall global refined products demand was heavily affected by the loss in demand in the Indian and Asian markets. However, the demand started to recover pretty quickly after the lockdowns were removed. However, and currently, many regions like Europe and US are still struggling to come to 2019 levels, as regions like Europe and Africa are currently experiencing some lockdowns because of the resurgence of virus. And we expect that the global refined products demand will be able to come back to 2019 levels only in the next 2 to 3 years. Specifically talking about the global refinery utilization rate, which is being depicted on the right side of the charts, um, there is a stark difference between the refinery utilization rates in Europe and in Indian refineries. Europe is facing resurgence of virus, and many refineries have to cut down their runs because of lack of demand. Whereas Indian refineries are already running at 98% of refinery utilization rates, as the demand has recovered greatly. And in fact, the refineries have also started to export some of the refined products. Now moving on to some of the major transportation refined products fuels like gasoline. Gasoline is very fundamental to every economy in every country. When the lockdowns were implemented, people were only allowed to move out for essential services and essential products, which weighed heavily on demand, and there was huge demand destructions. And Currently, the demand is hovering around 90% of 2019 levels, but there is a still lot of growth area for this product to go upwards, and we expect that as the the demand scenario improves in regions like Europe and Africa, who are facing renewed restrictions, gasoline demand will recover quite significantly. Specifically talking about jet fuel now, jet fuel demand has taken a dip after post-holiday season across different regions, and there are renewed restrictions as well, which has reduced the jet demand. The passenger traffic has reduced to about 50%, and which is weighing heavily on the jet fuel demand. Additionally, we expect that we keep hearing these words like travel corridors and air bubbles. Uh, we expect that such terms are going to get more practical and will be implemented more often as more countries and governments implement these air bubbles and travel corridors, things like vaccination passports so that people can commute from one country to another and international flights become more frequent. uh, Diesel, like gasoline, is very fundamental to every economy, and we expect that as the manufacturing and production plants across the region start to run at their full capacity, diesel demand will improve. Currently, because of the lockdowns in Europe, the diesel demand has been the growth in diesel demand was hindered. uh, However, it was somewhere offset by a very strong demand from US heating sector, uh, because US is experiencing very strong winter season, and which is driving the demand for diesel right now. Now, coming on to a very interesting topic, the Great Shakeout. We are calling it the Great Shakeout because COVID-19 has sort of accelerated refinery rationalization across the globe. So, on the chart on the left side, you can see all the refineries which have been closed since January 2020. Around 2.4 million barrels per day of capacity has been shut, and most of it has been in US and Europe. The reason for this is that refineries in US and Europe are less complex, they're smaller, and the demand destruction which was caused by the pandemic forced these refiners to cut runs or maybe shut permanently. Uh, and these refiners had to shut their refineries because it became commercially unviable for them to run. On the right side of the chart, represents the other side of the Great Shakeout, where we anticipate that around 6 million barrels per day of new capacity will be coming through by 2025, and most of it will be in Asia and Middle East. The reason for this is that emerging markets like Asia and Middle East will continue to have a very strong refined products demand, and because of this, these countries will be adding more refinery capacities. In order to link these two events, we can say that because the demand is improving so much in these emerging markets and new capacities are coming up, it is forcing somewhere the US and European refiners to shut down their refineries. Also, we think that one of the other reasons which is guiding refinery rationalization is the need to move towards cleaner fuels. And as companies are pushing towards biorefineries and many other types of refineries, we expect that some of the existing refineries in US and Europe will potentially be getting converted into biorefineries. For example, we recently read this news that a Total's refinery in France is going to get converted into a biorefinery. So we expect more such events in the future. Now, deep diving into the Indian landscape, to specifically talk about the Indian landscape, I think the worst hit refined product was the jet fuel, as it dropped by 49.3% in 2020, and Other transportation fuels like gasoline and diesel also dropped by 9.2 and 14.1% respectively. The overall refined products demand fell by 9.6% and stood at 4.3. The Indian government implemented nationwide lockdown in the last week of March, and there was a phased opening of the economy, which was completed in October. And after the restrictions were removed and the markets were open, and there was a festive season in the last quarter of 2020, demand improved significantly, and mobility also improved to around 100% of last year levels. We expect more such events in the future, because even though the vaccine process is not complete in India, and India plans to vaccinate around 100 million of its population by August, it is only a small fraction of its population. However, we anticipate that um, whether we will be able to complete the vaccination process or not, the demand is already showing signs of complete recovery. And we expect that the overall refined products demand for 2021 for Indian market will be around 4.7 million barrels per day, compared to 4.3 in 2020. Now, specifically talking about jet fuel, we expect that there will be some structural and behavioral changes in terms of travel, which will guide structural changes in jet fuel demand. And whatever growth there will be in terms of jet fuel demand, which it will be guided by addition of new flights in the emerging markets, and as and when as the disposable incomes of the population living in these emerging markets like India and China increases, it will support jet fuel demand. Specifically talking about Indian market, we do not anticipate a nationwide lockdown in the coming months. However, we cannot rule out the arrival of a second wave of COVID-19 cases, as currently we are seeing resurgence of cases in states like Maharashtra, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. So we do anticipate that the demand recovery may get hampered by events where the vaccines are not being completely rolled out, or people are not willing to take the vaccines. Also, in cases where there are high cases of COVID-19, and so these factors combined will impact the demand for Indian market going forward. This is it from my end, and thank you for listening. We can move to any questions that we have from the audience.
Thank you so much, Ishita, for the insightful presentation. We do have a couple of questions. There's a lot of chat that has been happening, so I may go back and forth to a couple of questions. I hope I'm being able to relate the questions. The first question is, there is a comment by Mr. Shankar. He says the energy consumption for transportation fuel transportation for people is also dependent on availability of good public transport system. If we can provide good transport system economically, we don't have to worry about low vehicle ownership per thousand, which is just 45 in India. And as government is giving the boost to electric vehicles, do we see a near future drop in the demand for crude oil and petrol and diesel? And how are we going to cope with this effect on the demand?
Okay.
You want to take the question, or Rishita, you want me to take the question?
I think the first part is related to what you said, Ashok. Yeah.
The first thing is, of course, the pertinent point which is made is that if public transportation improves, then we don't need to look at the low vehicle ownership. No, having said that, yes, there is a need for public transportation to improve all across the country. There's a lot of, for example, many of the cities are also implementing now metro rail projects, etc. In a scale never seen before. But despite all that, it still is a very, very low vehicle ownership. So we are not talking of a world average, or we are not talking of, I mean, even going anywhere near that figure. The only thing is, see, in terms of an aspiration of the people, there is still a huge population which does not own a vehicle, and they aspire to own a vehicle. So that cannot be negated. So in that sense, while we need not look at the developed or the advanced countries' statistics to be applicable to India, I mean, despite all the improvement in the mass transportation systems, you would still find that there is a growth opportunity for the automotive vehicles in this country, because of the sheer aspirational need of a large population which has not been used to these things. I mean, I have been personally seeing the transformation, from people going by bullock carts to how they graduated to cycles. Today, you go to I mean, even 20 years back, I couldn't see cycles in villages. People had gone to mopeds. I mean, the south of the country from where I come from, people used to talk about the TVS moped in a very large manner in those places. I mean, you could see agricultural crops being transported in mopeds and all that. Then you saw the transformation from mopeds to these one-tonner vehicles. When Tata's launched the Ace vehicle, you could see, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of vehicles when you used to travel to villages or around the rural populace. So there is a huge opportunity. In fact, part of my earlier company, when we introduced the rural outlet concept, everybody thought rural outlet means it's only a diesel market, because agriculture is used for pumping, and for tractors you need diesel and all that. But surprisingly, we found the gasoline sales in the rural outlets far outstripping the diesel sales, which means people are actually wanting to own vehicles, personal vehicles in those areas. So there is a huge amount of opportunity, or for the potential for the automobile sector to grow in these places. So that is one thing which is bound to happen. We may not reach anywhere in the scale, while we need to improve our mass transportation in cities and overall, there is definitely space for growth. So that is what will drive gasoline demand. And even many of the international agencies, as well as reputed researchers, have said that in terms of light vehicle ownership, India is continuing to grow. I mean, probably Ishita can also bear me out. I mean, IHS own statistics say that the LMVs will continue to grow in that. I mean, electric vehicles, etc., will have their space. But in terms of absolute growth, I personally feel that it is the incremental growth which is going to be impacted by some of these changes, and not the absolute growth as such. So you would like to add something, Ishita?
Yeah, so I think the need to own personal vehicles has also been accelerated by COVID, because now people prefer, owning their own personal vehicles than traveling by public transportation. So that is one. And gasoline demand is majorly run by the automobile sector, the transportation sector in India, and 60% of gasoline demand comes from two-wheelers. And in the next let's say, I believe in the next 10 to 20 years, I think within the light duty vehicles fleet section, more two-wheelers will continue to dominate, and they will be the major drivers for gasoline demand.
Any more?
Yeah. Any other
Okay.
question that we have?
So we have one more question. I think it's more like a statement, which I would like to read. The refineries are focusing on sulfur content, which is good. I think the time has come for them to focus on carbon capture economically and efficiently. China is using the CO2 captured for making methanol. Refineries, power plants, and fertilizer plants are throwing a lot of CO2 in the air, and they need to act fast. We are only concentrating on the transport industry. So if you could just
I can take
elaborate on
that
that.
question. It's again a very valid point. I mean, you need to really focus on. I mean, you need to focus on all the things which are, I mean, emissions which are bad. So CO2 certainly is one of the major factors which actually contributes to emissions. And CO2 capture, I can narrate some interesting things which are happening. See, CO2 is required by the upstream industry. I mean, essentially for enhanced oil recovery and so on. There are a couple of projects which have been announced even in our country where the downstream refiners are going to link up with the upstream companies so that the CO2 which is there in the refineries can be diverted to being used by the upstream companies to enhance their oil recovery. Ultimately, the CO2 will be getting into the ground and then trying to push up more oil for recovery. So these are some interesting projects. Parallelly, there are also things which are happening, especially both in the pure chemical technology route as well as in the biotechnology route. I mean, one is the capture of CO2 to make methanol, etc. There are activities which are happening around that. The other interesting thing is how do we convert CO2 to usable products like ethanol and so on through biotechnology route. I mean that some interesting projects are actually happening in the country. Probably some of you would hear about it soon when these units are getting commissioned. Probably some of them could be very unique to the world itself. It could be potentially one of the first projects to come up of this nature in the country. So very rightly put, I mean, we need to cut down on the CO2 emissions as well. And while cutting down on the CO2 emissions, whether CO2 capture is possible, whether we can do the carbon capture and sequestration and so on, or whether we are able to push it into the earth, or whether we are able to convert it into usable products. These are areas which need a lot of effort and work. Ultimately, doing these things economically is going to matter to the industry. And I think technology is in the forefront of such developments. And in future, we will be hearing a lot of this about such things happen. Ishita, anything from your side on this?
No, I think you covered everything very aptly.
Okay, so we have one more question. We want to ask this question specifically to Mr. Ashok. When do you see RRPCL materializing? That's the question.
$1 million question.
That's a good question. But let me just give you a sense. Okay. As I said in the beginning, I think the whole project has been conceived in a very unique manner. In fact, we conceived it at least 6 years ago. So in that sense, we were very, very advanced in our thinking that this needed to be an integrated project. This needed to be in a size and scale which was competitive globally. And certainly in terms of the project definition, we have said that this project should be set up in such a manner because it's going to last for the next 50, 100 years. We are building a project for the future. As some of you would know, many of the refineries which are set up in the country already are very old. I mean, you have several refineries which are 50 plus years of working. We even have the world's oldest operating refinery in the country, which is almost close to 120 years in age. Maybe not in technology, but in terms of age, at least it is. We have several low capacity refineries, etc. So we had conceptualized this project as a very futuristic project with all aspects of sustainability, of being a green refinery, and also a typically integrated refinery. I mean, when I say integrated, it is not only integrated with petrochemicals, but also considering that with energy transition happening, if we have to be flexible enough to manufacture products of the future, whether some of the fuels need to be converted into petrochemicals, etc., the design parameters have been actually worked around that to make it flexible. And the other major thing is that the involvement of the promoters. I mean, in terms of a partnership, this is a great partnership. Today, the world is talking of major projects in terms of partnerships. We thought of it 5-6 years ago itself, that a project of this nature will have to be done in partnership because the risk is too high for any individual promoter. So today we have three great partners in the country, and we also have a couple of overseas partners who are, I mean, huge by themselves. So this is a project which is quite ideally set up in the sense of both its magnitude, scale, the technological design, and in terms of the partnership, so that overall we need this for the energy security of the country, to cut down the imports of petrochemical products in the country, and all of that. So it's very uniquely positioned. Yes, we would have liked to start this project by this time, we would have liked, but then we have also been impacted by COVID. And along with that, yes, there are issues around the location of this project, I mean, the finalization of the land and all that. Having said that, I am quite confident that this project is required. This is a national project. This is no promoter's project. It is a national project required for the country. So I think we would soon see the light of day, and we would set it up. The major concern is that we don't have too much of a time. We can't take 20 years to set up a project of this scale. So how do we set up this project in speed is going to be mattering a lot, because I don't think we have too much time on hand to set up a project of this nature. So we need to do it quickly. So I hope, for the sake of the country's energy security and for the sake of economic growth, because the growth and the momentum which a project like this can provide to the country is actually unimaginable. I don't want to quote any of the numbers, though I do have all those things, but what it will do to the economy, what it will do to the employment generation in the country and all that is humongous. For the sake of all that, I hope that this project will take off soon and benefit the country.
Surely, Mr. Ashok. So I think the next question was similar, and which has already been answered. How do you see the prospects and timeline of Ratnagiri refinery? So this has already been answered, covered along with the previous question. The next is energy efficiency and improving profitability is a need of the hour. There are compact and energy efficient plate heat exchanger technology available which can contribute. Any government incentive for using such technology?
Well, I'm not sure of the government incentive, but no technology provider should look at incentives for doing their business. All these things should have to be self-sustaining in their own way. Definitely the scope for improving energy efficiencies in the refineries is huge. Similarly, the scope for improving efficiencies of automobiles. I mean, when you're talking the later generation Euro 6 vehicles and all that, they are far more efficient compared to the older generation vehicles. So in that sense, you know, this is how we actually achieve our objective of how do we optimize our consumption of petroleum products, or how do we bring down the crude imports of the country and all that. Even though overall crude imports may be going up because our consumption is going up, but a lot of it, due to wasteful inefficiencies, can be curbed. So I'm sure that any effort to improve, or any technology which supports improvement in energy efficiencies, should be implemented. But these technologies should be able to provide the economic benefit for the industry, which by themselves should be able to then use the technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok. One last question. Can artificial intelligence technology play important role in refinery industry? Any opportunity in near future?
Artificial intelligence, I mean, digital, all these can have a lot of usage in the industry. For example, I mean, one of the oil companies recently had said, I mean, they had started an initiative wherein all their rotary equipments have been digitally linked up to a common provider. I mean, many of you must have read at least about this, that GE, which supplies aircraft engines all across, they monitor all the engines of the various operating aircrafts at a particular period of time. They have the technology to link up all that, analyze, do the predictive maintenance, etc., and so on. So today, technology affords us an opportunity. Similarly, in the refining also, when you have to improve reliabilities, when you have to, reduce maintenance costs, when you have to reduce the turnaround maintenance times and so on, I mean, there is a huge opportunity for artificial intelligence. Even in terms of construction opportunities, when you have big equipments to be moved into a site and all that, today virtual reality, etc., provides you an opportunity to visualize these things much in advance instead of physically taking those equipments, struggling to position them within the site and all that. You have a lot of opportunities. So there is a huge amount of opportunity in terms of using these technologies, and not only in operations, even during construction. So I think there are opportunities for all of this to be implemented in a refining industry. In fact, refining has been a little late, but then when refinery really starts moving, the usage can be exponentially increased. That's what happens.
We have one more question. It says, what is the future of renewable diesel production in India?
You're talking of biodiesel?
Renewable diesel production in India.
No, biodiesel, biodiesel certainly, there's an opportunity in the country. Like ethanol has been a fair amount of success in the last few years. The government is also focused, but then ethanol is used for blending in gasoline. So we initially started with sugar industry producing ethanol and supplying. Of course, the industry's requirement was not satisfied. Of course, enough incentives were given in terms of pricing and so on. And today we are talking of 2G ethanol, 3G ethanol being produced, and so on. Similarly, for diesel, I think there is a need. We did have some amount of production through palm stearate and so on, which again used to be imported. So the palm-based oils did a few units came up using palm stearate and then producing biodiesel. But there is a lot of opportunity in terms of used oil, which is what happening in Europe and so on. Even used vegetable oils and then reprocessing them and then converting them to biodiesel, etc. There is an opportunity for that. And similarly, any sort of waste crops to produce biodiesel, these opportunities are all there in the country. When you're talking of potential, I think potential is quite unlimited in the country. What you need to really do is find an economical way of really producing this so that it can get absorbed in the industry.
The next question says the best way to reduce the carbon footprint is by recycling of waste polymers. This could also reduce the import bill. Can you put light on this as well, Mr. Ashok?
No, I agree. The recycling efforts have to be substantially increased. I think there's a lot of focus. I heard the earlier speaker also talking about it in terms of how the polymers are being reprocessed, etc. In the country, especially the problem has been with once-use plastic. No, people used to throw away the one-use, single-use plastics and all that, and many governments even took a step of banning that just before COVID. But again, after COVID, I think the emphasis in terms of implementation of such practices have got reduced. We again find a lot of single-use plastics being circulated, and this not only causes all sorts of problems in our various pipelines and the sewage systems and so on, but recycling is definitely a major issue. World is also talking about producers' responsibility in terms of recycling. The producers of the plastic products should also have an onus in terms of recycling efforts. So as a large user of plastic and probably continued large user of plastic and related products, I think there is an opportunity to set up recycling units in the country. I think this is another area where we need to focus, and certainly that will cut down on imports also. But again, as I said, all these things will have to be done in an economical way. If recycling is going to be extremely expensive, people would rather throw away that than focus on recycling. So there is a need for technology to work on economic solutions.
Ishita, would you like to add to that?
No, nothing. No points as such.
Thank you so much. Let me check if there are any more questions. Are companies seeing plant digitalization as important need for refineries and process industries?
Um, yeah, I think Mr. Ashok spoke on it in depth. I think one of the examples that we can give is of IOCL, wherein they implemented the first remote monitoring system for oil refineries turbines, which is called the proactive predictive analytics based technology. So I believe the NOCs within India are at the forefront of leading some of the major digital transformations. And IOCL has also launched the 100 octane rating fuel called XP100. And then BPCL recently launched this BP Mark to test the quality and characteristics of crude oil within an hour compared to the other conventional processes. So I think the digital transformations are happening, and I think they are picking pace. And in the future, I think there's more to come.